All right, Troy. So a lot has happened. We have not done a ton of basketball, so we're going to treat today kind of like a Wizards for Dummies episode to get all caught up on all the things that have kind of happened since basketball ended. Let's start here. I know we have had conversations in the past about Tommy Shepard. It felt like a good decision in the moment. He's a lifer. He's grinded more tape than tons of people, me and you combined. What was it that Tommy just never got right? Because I thought maybe that was going to work.
Well, I think that Tommy never really stuck to a plan. And so, yes, Tommy knows more about basketball than, you and I and probably all of Wizards Twitter combined will probably ever know. But at the end of the day, even a novice could see that he was kind of all over the place with his decision making. So, it would be 1 minute he would be, extending Brad and trying to, add veteran presence around him. And then the next minute he's trading away Russell Westbrook and going on a youth movement. And then it's like he never really had the concrete plan in place. And so what you got over time was the continuation of the Wizards over the last decade or so. It's just riding on a hamster wheel of being in the middle. They were never really, in my eyes, true contenders, and they were never really bad enough to be one of those teams, in contention for one of those high lottery picks. And so for him to not really pick a course was, I think, his most detrimental course of action.
Do you think the owner was a lot to do with that? How does the owner play into how all that shaped out with the last couple of GMs and the philosophy of the organization?
Well, I do think that I know for a fact that Ted Leonsis loved Bradley Beal, and he was a fan of trading. He was a fan of re-signing Bradley Beal to that max contract extension. But that's why they pay Tommy Shepard the big dollars as the team president, is to go out and make tough decisions around that decision. So we can't put all the onus on Ted Leonsis for wanting to keep Bradley Beal. He's the owner, and they have a good relationship. So that should have not have been any surprise. But all the other ancillary moves around that, we have to put and lay at the feet of Tommy Shepard.
But was Tommy given the autonomy to do things like that, right? I mean, we saw the same thing with the football team where in the end, GM might have wanted to do one thing, but wasn't given the opportunity by the owner. I don't know the answer to that. I'm asking you if you do.
Yeah, well, I think he was given that autonomy, and he just made the wrong decisions. And so when you look at what Ted Leonsis and Michael Winger actually went on a podcast with Adrian Wojnarowski from ESPN, and in that podcast, Ted said that Tommy would come in with one plan and then come in 2 weeks later with a whole different plan, and not good enough explanations as to why they were diverting from the plan. So I think that like I said, that Ted definitely wanted to keep Brad, but it was up to Tommy that all of the other decisions surrounding that, that one decision is ultimately the reason why he's not here anymore. And that has to be on him, because he's the one who went out and drafted Denny Avdia over all-star Tyrese Haliburton. He's the one who traded Russell Westbrook away for all these great pieces. And then now a year or two later, all those pieces are gone. He traded KCP for a backup point guard. Kyle Kuzma seems to be ready to walk out the door. And, they end up with almost nothing from that trade. These are all things that I think that have to be put squarely on the shoulders of Tommy Shepard.
Why on earth did they give him the trade clause? Because it killed them, right? I mean, in retrospect, as we hear it now, and they were not like they were lucky to have unloaded the contract, right? People are saying they didn't get enough for it, but as you hear around the league more and more come out, there were not a lot of people that were willing to take that thing on, right?
Yeah, no, there weren't a lot of people. I believe that Bradley Beal and his agent Mark Bartelstein, shout out to them, because they're doing what's in best interest of them. But they pretty much held the Washington Wizards as an organization, held their feet to the fire for multiple years. And so when you look at a lot of the decisions they were making, a lot of that was to acquiesce to Brad and Mark Bartelstein. And, I think that the no trade clause was just a part of that. That, that they had built up, so much fear within the Wizards organization of, them losing Brad for nothing or him threatening to walk out the door, which I'm told he never really did. But I think that, they were just acquiescing to everything that, Brad and Mark Bartelstein wanted. And so the no trade clause was really just a part of that.
And because of that, no first round picks. I mean, they got nothing in return. Or will we look at it and say, in actuality, they got a fair amount in return after everything was done?
I think they got a lot in return. When you really think about it in the grand scheme of things, those 6 second round picks is not nothing. And those pick swaps, while though I think the first 2 years was the 24 and 26 might not be anything, but in 28 and 30, those pick swaps might mean something, because you could be looking at a Phoenix Suns team who, after years of paying, crazy luxury tax money, they might be willing to blow it up, and they might actually be worse than the Wizards, 6 years down the line. But also, you got to look at the fact that, when they made their trade, I know one person who definitely, wasn't happy about some of the headlines that were going out was Chris Paul, because everybody keeps saying they traded Bradley Beal for nothing, and Chris Paul was in that deal, and that wasn't nothing, because they were able to, turn around and trade Chris Paul to the Golden State Warriors for Jordan Poole. So, essentially, they're getting a guy, and what I like to equate it to is they're getting probably 75% of Bradley Beal for 50% of the cost.
They got a better return for Beal or Porzingis?
I'd say they got a better return for Beal, just because we don't know what those second round draft picks are. So like that in the Porzingis deal, we only got back Tyus Jones. And so that's a very tangible way to say, oh, we got this for this. But with the Bradley Beal deal, there's an asset tree of things that are going to be able to happen from that trade. So at today's date, we can't even sit up here and say, the full value or full scope of what it is they got in that Bradley Beal trade, just because there's so much unknown about what those future assets will become.
So help me understand this a little bit, because I know that the cap is changing, and part of what eventually will be resources, I guess. Part of the good thing about moving the Bradley Beal contract is that the team will be able to take on other contracts teams want to get rid of because of whatever is coming. And I hope you'll explain that to me, because I'm not really sure what it is. I just know that teams are getting ready to be scrambling to unload these contracts. And essentially, that's how, for the people that say they got no first round picks with Beal, essentially that's how they'll get first round picks, right? Is by taking on other contracts. Help me break that down a little bit, because I'm not sure what's coming that is forcing people to do that.
Okay, so the two biggest things to know about the new CBA that will penalize tax spending teams is the fact that there will be a hard cap and limits on what teams can do if you're in the luxury tax. So as far as moves, there's a thing called the mid-level exception, which is a $12 million contract that teams can offer to free agents during the free agency signing period. So if you're one of those teams like the Phoenix Suns, who's going to be hard capped and in the luxury tax, they will no longer have the option to sign players to the mid-level exception. So it severely limits what they're able to do as far as going out and roster and team building. And then the other big thing, it always comes back to money. Cash rules everything around me. And so, there's going to be, an enormous tax bill for some of these teams. And at the end of the day, yes, I know, this is a business, but some of those teams that you're going to see a lot more basketball teams making moves in order to just cut their tax bill instead of, going out and trying to chase a championship.
And as far as taking the contracts, this team will be looking to do that by adding picks, right? That's what happens.
Exactly. Well, it really kind of depends. So if you look at a move that happened this week, John Collins, who was traded to the Utah Jazz, and essentially for Rudy Gay, and that was essentially a salary dump because they didn't have it saved them, I think, like $16 million. And so when you look at it from the Jazz perspective, they didn't get any draft compensation, but that's because John Collins is actually a good basketball player.
Right.
And so there are going to be other situations where, there's going to be trades like that where the player is not going to be as good. And so you will have to attach draft compensation, to that player.
Also, can I just comment? Rudy Gay's still in the league? He's like my age. I can't believe that man was still.
Yeah, he's older than me. He's still in the league. Shout out to him for being one of those players who was able to kind of, adjust his career into that second half, right? Where he went from being, a ball dominant guy who was leading teams' offense or being the number 1 or 2, 3 option on teams to being able to be a 3-and-D guy. And, I think that a lot of guys who don't have staying power in the NBA is because they really aren't able to adapt into that second half of their careers and kind of change the way how they play. And so this is a guy, Rudy Gay. He still has a lot of talent, but more so than anything, I think that he adapted his game, and by all accounts, he's a good guy. So anytime you're able to add a good guy, I mean, I've been around him a few times. I mean, he's just cool as hell. So like when you have younger guys are going to want to look up to him and come to him and ask him about all sorts of stuff just because he's been through it, and he just stays so even keeled.
Well, and he had the big injury, right? I mean, I think it was ago he blew that leg out and then rebuilt it. Baltimore kid, I believe. But I was amazed that he was still in the league. All right, so they have blown up the structure of not just the Wizards, but of the whole thing at Monumental Sports. Walk me through the org chart as it's now.
Okay, so the head of so really you're talking when you have Monumental Sports, that is the big umbrella, and so under that you have the Wizards, the Mystics, the Capitals, and the Capital One Arena, the building. Separate from underneath Monumental Sports, you have Monumental Basketball, which is its own entity within Monumental Sports. And so Michael Winger is the president of Monumental Basketball. And so that means he has operations over the Wizards, the Go-Go, and the Mystics. And so with that, underneath of that, then now you have Will Dawkins, who is the general manager of the Wizards. And so you have Amber Nichols, who's the general manager of the Go-Go, and then you have Eric Thibault, who is running the Mystics. And so that's really how the flow chart goes. But Winger really makes he has final say on any of the 3 entities that fall under him. But I mean, on a day-to-day basis, each of those entities has their own guy or lady in Amber Nichols' case, who is running the organization. And so and then under that you have what I think the VP line for the Wizards would be Travis Schlenk, John Thompson III, and then under them would be Brett Greenberg as assistant GM. So that's how the organizational flow chart. So it would go for the Wizards, it would go from decision making, it would go from Winger to Will Dawkins to Travis Schlenk and John Thompson III, then to Brett Greenberg. So I know it's a complicated thing, but at the end of the day, I think that having a leveled corporate structure gives this organization a little bit more foundational stability, and probably looks a lot more similar to other organizations around the league.
What does this mean for Wes Unseld Jr.?
Well, I mean, all those guys, most of those guys that I named weren't here when Wes Unseld Jr. was hired. So I think that what this means for him is that, I mean, he's really in a lame duck, show it or prove it type of season, because these guys didn't bring him in. And so I think really the only reason why he's still here is because of his name and the legacy that name holds in the Washington, D.C. area. And so I think that, it would behoove him to go out there and it's not just go out there and winning games. It's going out there and showing that he has control over the team and that, he has enough cachet that they believe in him enough to want to keep him around. And like I said, that does not equate directly to wins and losses. Because I think there's a world where, they can win 27 games and he still has a good season coaching.
And what do you expect to happen here as free agency opens? There's still more moves to be made, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so I think that we got to look. I think that Kyle Kuzma, I've been saying this all along, I think that Kyle Kuzma is out the door. And not because they don't like him as a player. It's just because he's at the stage of his career where him signing for as much money as possible is the number one priority for him. And just looking at how the cards are laid out, that being his number one option is more likely to happen coming outside of the Wizards organization. And so I think even the best case scenario would be for him to sign with the team and they try to, work out some sign and trade where they could get, maybe one young player on a cheap deal or another second round pick. But if you can get something in return, that's better than nothing. But I do not foresee Kyle Kuzma coming back to the Wizards. And I just think that, that there will be a couple of names that the Wizards will look at in terms of free agents that they'll be able to, they'll have that mid-level exception money, which is $12 million to go out and sign a veteran. But at this point, I don't see the Wizards being major players in this year's free agency. Like I said, I think that they would make much better use of their salary cap space by waiting until another team wants to trade a distressed asset and get a draft pick rather than taking that money and going out and signing somebody. So, I don't look for and number one, the Wizards have like 17, 18 guys who they have signed under contract for next year. There's only 15 roster spots. So they already have a problem when it comes to the amount of roster spots and the amount of space they have. So I just wouldn't expect, I know Wizards fans don't want to hear this, I just wouldn't expect them to be, major players or players at all when it comes to free agency.
Any more names to be shipped out of DC?
Yeah, well, I think, when you start looking around, I've been hearing that Monty Morris is a name that I think he's been in a lot of trade talks. And then when you look at, he's kind of scrubbed his page of all things Washington Wizards related. Oh, right. And, he's put up the eyes emoji and then the popcorn emoji. It's just like, if you start putting two and two together, I think that that's a guy who probably will be out the door. And the thing is, I believe that he has a lot of value around the league as he's probably one of the top 5 backup point guards in the NBA. And he's only making, I think, scheduled to make $10 million this year. So, he's a valuable asset. Who else do I believe will be going out the door? That's probably the only person I can say that I have heard things about. Now, I think that DeLon Wright is a guy that I think that teams have been calling and inquiring about. But to me, I think that he is a perfect fit to be here next to Jordan Poole. If you got a guy who all he does is jack up shots, then I'd probably want a bigger guy who all he does is defend, to play next to him. That I think that's a backcourt and pairing that actually could work. So unless some team comes and gives them, something substantial, I don't see them just trading him. But I'd say one thing that I would look towards is what the team plans to do with Deni Avdija, because pretty much he's going to be in the same position as Rui Hachimura was last season when it comes to, he's entering, his 4th year in the NBA. And so after this year, they're eligible to either give him a contract extension or wait until next summer when he's going to hit restricted free agency. And so you look at, this is another situation where this is not a guy that that this regime drafted. And so I think that, but I definitely think that they are going to be willing to give him, this first half of the season or the whole season to kind of see where he fits in towards the future. But, I'd say just given how his contract situation is right now, I just wouldn't be surprised if they did something with him because it just would only make sense with the uncertainty surrounding him.
What does he need to do to get that contract? What does a productive year for Deni Avdija look like? Because it feels like he has not gotten to the place where I think we as fans thought he'd be by now.
Well, he needs to get a left hand. That's the first thing. Like, this is a guy who is so
But
great
I
at
saw
dominant.
videos. He's out there practicing apparently.
Yeah, he needs to be practicing that left hand. And I think that he needs to raise his 3-point shooting to a more respectable level. I'm not, saying that he needs to come out here and be like Corey Kispert shooting 40%, but he needs to get it up to, 35, 36, 37%, something like that. And I think that he just needs to be more assertive with his offensive game as far as being able to produce with and without the basketball. It's when you look at a guy like Corey Kispert, yes, he's a much better shooter, but Corey Kispert showed that, he's a great cutter and that he can do other things to affect the game without having the ball in his hands. And so, yeah, I know Denny out there, they wants to be, point Denny, and he wants to have all this other stuff. But, in reality, he's never, ever going to be on a team where they put the ball in his hands. That's just not going to happen. So he needs to learn to develop skills where he can be more effective without having the basketball in his hands.
Corey Kispert is the better player right now.
Oh yeah, I've been saying it for years that that the Wizards' best young Wizards prospect is Corey Kispert. That was when they still had Rui Hachimura on the team. There's not even a question that Corey Kispert is a better prospect than Denny Avdia. I mean, he is like essentially everything you want from a young 3-and-D wing player. He's actually a legitimate 6'7", so he has a lot more size than what people are giving him credit for. He is a prolific 3-point shooter. He's shown that he can do a couple of things off of the bounce. He has a right hand. He has a left hand. He defends well for his position on the ball, like as far as just staying in front of his man. Now, I think that he has to work on a lot more on his defensive instincts when it comes to switching and his off-ball help defense. I think that he finds himself in the wrong position too many times. And so that just kind of comes with the attrition of playing more NBA basketball. But when it comes to what he can do offensively, I mean, this guy is a legitimate NBA asset. And so, I don't think that, he's available for teams. And if he were available, it'd be to go out and get an NBA superstar. He's a guy that any NBA team, all 30 NBA teams can use on their roster and build around.
To round out the recent first-round selections of Johnny Davis, what is that? I mean, did he just need some seasoning, or that was a mistake?
Well, I mean, it's tough to call it a mistake just because there have been, a few cases in past years where guys completely flamed out in their rookie seasons. Honestly, look at Jordan Poole. If you looked at Jordan Poole's numbers after his rookie season, I think there would be question marks on whether, he would have sticking power in the NBA. And then 3 years later, he's signing a max contract extension. I think that Johnny Davis, had one of the worst rookie seasons that you could possibly have. But one of the reasons why I think the Wizards drafted him was because of, the character of the person. And so when you look at, this guy showing the resolve of he didn't fold towards the end of the year. Like this, I mean, this dude couldn't hit the side of the barn for the entirety of for the majority of the season. But by the end of the year, he was hitting some shots. Now he still looked a little bit robotic and a little bit of his movement, but he was hitting some shots. And so I look at him and I say that, this is a guy who, if he can put in the work, then I do believe that there is a slight possibility that he could turn into an NBA player. So I'm not giving up on him yet, but it doesn't look good.
It did not look good. As it stands right now, who's the starting five come next year?
So I'd probably look at Tyus Jones at the 1, Jordan Poole at the 2, Corey Kispert at the 3, Denny Avdia at the 4, and Daniel Gafford at the 5. And so I think that they're giving up a little bit in terms of size, but Denny Avdia, with him being 6'9" and reportedly still growing, and he was a great rebounder for his position. I think that is a starting 5 that could compete on a nightly basis, or at least make these games competitive. Like, I don't think the Wizards are going to be coming out here getting shellacked, 20 and 30 points, even no more than what they did last season. I think that the product on the floor and what they put out next year is going to be a lot better, in which a lot of pundits are really thinking so far.
And that's because of this notion that it was a complete strip down. But if Jordan Poole is who Jordan Poole was when Steph Curry was out, then maybe it speeds the process up a little bit. Where are you on Jordan Poole? What's his ceiling look like?
Yeah, well, I think his ceiling, to me, I think that he could reach something what Brad did a couple seasons ago, where he was averaging almost 30 points a game. Team wasn't winning much, but Jordan Poole is that much of a prolific NBA scorer. He has elite handles, which means that he can get to any spot on the basketball court, and he's shown the ability to be able to. He's not afraid to take and make big shots, and so this is a guy. I've been saying this. They NBA games where teams run 110 possessions. If this is a guy who has the ball in his hand for 35 to 40 of those possessions, he's going to make things happen. Also, Jordan Poole's a much better passer than Bradley Beal, so I expect his assist numbers to go up as well. This is a guy who possesses a lot of elite guard skills that make all-stars in today's NBA. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to end up an all-star, but he possesses a lot of the elite skills that all-star guards in today's NBA possess. And I think that a guy who was very much overrated last year playing with the Golden State Warriors is now going to become a very much underrated asset, especially when you're looking at the fact that, he's only going to be making not only, but, $27 million a year. Like that to me, for a guy who averages 20 points a game, he averaged 20 playing next to Stephen Clay last year. Right. So imagine what he's going to do, with the ball in his hands even more. I think that, the tide has turned where he's gone from overrated asset to underrated asset.
I got laughed at the other day when I said this, but I don't feel like there's a huge drop-off from Beal to Poole. There is a drop-off, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's like some noticeable set the franchise back drop-off between Beal and Poole. Am I crazy in that?
No, you're not crazy at all. Like, to me, I think that, Brad is definitely a little bit more efficient. But they're like I said, they just have different skill sets to me. Yep. Whereas, Jordan Poole is a prolific ball handler in a way that I don't think Brad was. But Brad was way more adept at getting to the rim, and he had the strength to finish at the rim. But Jordan Poole is a better shooter. Like, he's a better three-point shooter. He's a better free throw shooter. Like, Jordan Poole damn near shoots 90% from the free throw line. And so, you look at a guy like that who's going to have his free throw numbers go up. Like the pathway for him to score, between 25 and 30 points per game next season is right there. So I agree completely with you that the drop-off isn't nearly as significant as some others might think.
All right, let's get to the draft picks. I noticed that you did not have the number 6 pick in your starting 5. Is he ready to come over to the States right away, or does he need another year? That may be a stupid question. I just don't know the answer to it.
Yeah, and I think with Bilal Coulibaly, I think he's definitely going to play a lot. I think he's going to play probably like 20 minutes a game this season. But as far as you got to look at Wes Unseld Jr., he's one of those, like, I'm going to lean on my veteran type coaches. And, I think that for him at being 18 years old and last season, he wasn't even on the Metropolitans 92 big boy squad to start the season. He was on the junior squad, the under 21 team. And he ended up, having a great season and finishing, playing next to Wembanyama. But this is a guy he's still very young, and he has a lot to learn about the NBA basketball game. And so, that's not saying that he's not going to be a good prospect, but I just don't see him starting next season, with guys who play his position and have much more NBA experience. So I think that when you look at NBA basketball, it's so much about, just the flow of the game, and it's really poetry in motion. And so when you have a guy who's out there on the court who it may disrupt that flow just by being in the wrong spot because he doesn't know where to be. He doesn't know. Like, I think that there's a growing pain and a learning curve that comes with playing in the NBA that I don't believe will, see him starting next season. But I do think he'll play a lot because they have no incentive to not play him 20 minutes per game next year.
That's right. Did you like the pick?
I love the pick because it's for the Wizards. Like, we needed a home run swing. And that's exactly what Bilal Coulibaly is. He, like I said, he's shown, more growth over his last season than most guys show in 4 years of college. And so if you put him on that trajectory, I mean, this guy could end up being a special basketball player. And so for me, I think that, with them tearing this thing down to almost the studs of a house, like, I think that taking a home run swing on a prospect who could turn out to be, a future star in this league is a gamble that is well worth it.
Any of your draft picks strike your fancy, or just guys that you're hoping and praying on?
Well, I like the Tristan Vukcevic, the Wizards' second round pick. Mm-hmm. I think that he's a guy, a 7-footer with nice touch around the basket, and I think the biggest question with him will be whether he comes over this year or not. Shout out to my guy Neil DeLaw from Hoop District, who talked to Tristan Vukcevic at yesterday's Mystics game, and he said out of his own mouth that he plans on playing in Wizards Summer League. So I think that we'll learn a lot more about whether he'll be coming over and what his NBA perspectives will look like after we get a chance to see him out in Las Vegas.
Sure, let's wrap with this. What will be how will you remember Bradley Beal?
I will remember Bradley Beal as a guy who was a very thoughtful, caring, gracious individual, who a stand-up, respectable young man who I think any organization would be happy to make the face of their franchise, just of who he is as a person. And then I also think that he was greatly overrated with his basketball skill. And I think that the fact that he was so highly overrated by the Wizards organization that it ended up like kind of tarnishing his legacy in DC. And so because of how he exited and the way that everything transpired, it's not his fault that they gave him a supermax contract and made him a top 5 paid NBA player for a guy who most people have as only a top 30 NBA actual player on the court. That's not his fault. But, I do think that, he has to bear some responsibility because he never really developed the leadership skills to help elevate and raise the play of the people around him that people who get paid that type of money, that's why they get paid that money. Giannis doesn't get paid that money because he goes out and scores. He gets paid that money because he goes out, he makes everyone around him in that organization better. And so I think that, when we look at Brad's legacy, this is a guy who, when John Wall was here and when John Wall was at his best, Brad was at his best. And so when Brad had to show and prove that, he could be a leader and lead an organization, I think he fell short of that. And there's no shame in that. I don't think I'm somewhere in the middle. Like, I'm not a person who's trashed Bradley Beal, but because he's a great guy. He's never done anything bad to me. I've never disrespected him and said anything bad about him. But I just think that it's okay to say that he was overrated as a player. There's no shame in him not being able to be the lead dog on a team that was competing in the playoffs. I think that he's much more suited to be the number 3 option with the Phoenix Suns, and what he will be. And so, his legacy will always be tied with John Wall, but this was John Wall's team. And so, Brad, he will go down as the number 2 in the John Wall era.
Do you think there was you think there really was an opportunity 2 or 3 years ago when folks started talking about trading Brad and getting assets? I think there really was a point where he was going to get a couple of first-round picks in return, or was that all just pipe dreams by Wizard fans?
Most definitely, there was a point where there were teams that were calling, that were willing to offer first-round picks for him. Like that was not a pipe dream at all. They blew an opportunity to get something like Drew Holiday compensation. What the Bucks got back in the Drew Holiday deal, multiple first-round picks, a couple of young players. Like, the Wizards had that opportunity and they never took it because they were just they were just so in love with and tied to Bradley Beal, and at the end of the day, it cost them.
You think they kept Bradley? You think they were so enamored with Bradley because of how things worked out with John?
I think that those things are directly related. That that Brad was really like almost when it comes to off the court, the polar opposite of what John Wall represented. When it comes to like hanging out in the city, going out, like all that John Wall Rose Bar stuff, like that stuff that stuff isn't made up. John Wall was in the club every night. So I think that really Ted Leonsis was enamored with Bradley Beal because of just how much of a respectable young man he was. And so there's nothing wrong with that either. But I do think that they allowed their love with him and the way the John Wall situation ended to kind of make them put themselves in a position where they felt like they needed to keep him and overpay to do it.
Yeah. I lied. One last one. Do you really think the Wizards end up in Crystal City?
Man, I think it's something that I think it's something that is a real thing. Just because Capital One Arena, I know that I'm old enough to I know we're similar in age. Like I remember when the MCI Center was first built. But that was damn near more than 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And so now when you look at it, the building, not saying that it's old, but I'd say that when it comes to NBA arenas, that the Wizards are in the bottom half of NBA arenas right now. And I think they want a new arena. And I just don't see the city really trying to fork over billions of dollars to help Ted Leonsis pay for this. So it's hard. I'd say when you factor in all of those things, like to me, I don't think the city is going to help put up the money that Ted Leonsis wants. Matter of fact, but because the city already helped him pay for the new ESA arena in Southeast, so and they still haven't seen the returns on that. So I don't think that I do. So all that being said, I think it's a possibility, but I think that. At the end of the day, I think that one of the things that maybe they could try to do more renovations to Capital One Arena. I think that might be a stopgap measure that could prevent them from moving. But it's always a possibility.
Troy, you're the best, buddy. Always love having you. It's been too long. Oh no, I haven't done a podcast in a while. I don't know.
It's quite okay because honestly, the Wizards haven't given us much to talk about over the last year. Like that's not anybody's fault. Like they would come on a podcast and talk about what us blowing 35-point leads. Like what? Like there hasn't been much to talk about. So now shout out to Bradley Beal on that front because he's got the Wizards content game really popping right now.
That's right. That's right. And we'll include a link to the Substack.
Yeah, I greatly appreciate that, man, because I got a lot of things coming up with the Substack. I'm going to be out in Vegas for Summer League, and we're going to write some things about NBA free agency. But, I think that it's a great way to connect directly to the friends. And I think that, we're going to try to do a lot more things with that Substack. So I appreciate that.
No doubt. And maybe we'll holler at you while you're out in Vegas.
All right, yeah, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Yeah, I definitely would report live from the strip.
Love it. Book it. We'll do it. All right, thanks, buddy. I appreciate you.
All right, appreciate you, Big Doug. You keep shouting, my brother.